the most useful things and the most useful lessons I've had are first in failing to convey value or the prospect of value to the person I want to reach, and finding ways of turning that around and articulating it better and learning about copywriting. Like for me, Dom, once I got introduced to the world of copywriting and selling through words and understanding that it's an art and a science all in one, and learning about people like John Carlton and Joe Sugarman and reading their books and going down that road and going down that rabbit hole, that's where a lot shifted for me, just in how I carried myself within the context of whatever it was I was offering to people.
You are now listening to the podcast where authors inspire listeners to become authors, the Going North Podcast. I'm your host, certified self-leadership trainer, best-selling author, and book enthusiast Dom Brightman. And you're going to be listening to a different author that will inspire you to join the business of immortality, known as authorship. Now let the fun begin. Today's episode is sponsored by both books, Going North, Tips and Techniques to Advance Yourself, and the follow-up bestseller, Stay the Course, The Elite Performer's 7 Secret Keys to Sustainable Success. Head over to Amazon.com, pick up both books. They are available in a trifecta of paperback, audio, and ebook. Cop all three of both and be on the lookout for another book from yours truly to help podcasters succeed. Now let's get on with today's episode. And today on the highlight reel builder for authors known as the Going North Podcast, we're coming up on 6 years of this podcast actually still being here, which is kind of amazing because it's like, shoot, folks don't make it to 6 episodes, let alone 6 weeks, and actually keep going. It's like, oh, 6 freaking years. Like, we're still freaking doing this thing, Dom? It's like, yeah, I mean, well, when you got guests like what you're going to hear from today, you're going to figure out why I'm still doing this today, because today's guest in particular, my man's a freaking force of nature, y'all. That's right, indeed. You may have seen his books somewhere hidden, sometimes out in the open, somewhere close to your eyes, somewhere close to your ears. That's right, indeed. It could be like Spider-Man. It's like you never know because everybody gets one out of nowhere. It's like, oh, he shoots a web and it's in your mind to help you advance forward, because today's guest in particular is the #1 international best-selling author of multiple books, especially the particular one that's probably garnered a lot of his success today, as well as a coach and an entrepreneur. So let's give it up for the AK not 47, the one, the only, the awesome and kind Andrew Cap. How you doing today, Andrew?
What's up, Dom? Thank you for an awesome introduction. Best of all year, pretty much, and congratulations on 6 years, man. That's wonderful. I'm so glad. I'm assuming it's because you're having a great time. So I'm really grateful to be here as a guest and looking forward to wherever this conversation might go.
Woo! It'll go north indeed, because definitely honored to have you, my man, because it's like, dude, it's like kind of crazy, because yeah, you're right, I am having fun. It's like one day you're reading a book and it's like, oh wait, I could actually talk to this person one-on-one. It's like, oh, they're not a far away old sage in a mountain somewhere in East Asia.
Anywhere in the world, or maybe beyond it, right?
Yeah, I don't have to fight a tiger and then survive a bear when I get back from receiving the knowledge.
Love
So
it.
my yeah, man. So my goodness, I'm assuming my man probably had to fight a bear metaphorically for you to be the Andrew that you are today, man. So for those who are still living under some rocks and probably looking for that sage, they probably need to figure out who is the amazing Andrew, man. So am I filling in any cavities I may have missed about you, my man?
Yeah, well, it's interesting if people haven't discovered me, which, I mean, it makes sense. I'm only known to so many people, but it's funny because, when I published the last Law of Attraction book you'll ever need to read in 2019, I very intentionally left my name off the title, off the cover of the book, because it really, for me, it's not about ego or non-ego. It's not about being humble or the opposite. It's just about the real spotlight for me is whatever content I'm putting out and the person consuming it. So for me, it was a very huge artistic decision, at least in that first book, to be in the background. And anyone that might have seen that cover, if they didn't actually read the book, they never would have even seen my name or had any of that awareness about it. And for me, that's kind of like the sweet spot. That's the zone of comfort because I like being as out there as people need, but more importantly, I'm all about being of service to the content itself and letting it reach the people that it's supposed to reach.
So I'm talking about indeed. And that's definitely honorable indeed, my man. And my goodness, do you think that created like an intrigue factor or a good old secrecy factor? Because it's like, oh yeah, like who wrote this book? I don't see his name anywhere on the cover. I have to look inside for it.
Well, in the beginning when I published that was something that I'm aware, like it's kind of like an automatic thing. It's like, who is this person? Can't find them on Google, blah, blah, blah. And I kind of, I guess, enjoy that or basked in it for a couple of months. But then I kind of threw it by the wayside because I was like, well, what else can I do here? Well, let me start a YouTube channel. And then, I'm kind of out there in that way. And then people like, see my face, not that I was hiding, and let me do interviews. So I pretty much had the intrigue for a little bit and enjoyed it and soaked it in. And then I'm like, well, that doesn't serve everyone the best either. So let me switch gears again. And that's kind of like a recurring theme. Like I'm not about switching gears of the sense of like giving up on one thing and desperately jumping to another. But by that same token, simultaneously, I'm really excited about letting myself break with whatever convention or standard I might have been holding myself to in the past if I don't think it's any longer the best or most prudent or most efficient way of getting my work out there.
So I'm talking about indeed. And I'm guessing the sales increased too. So what helped you to get the confidence to realize, you know what? Yeah, this is cool hiding my name and all, but it's like, let me get myself out there, especially when you started replying to some of the great reviews you were getting.
Yeah, well, for me, it's almost like I would call it a 20-step process, but it begins with a two-step process. And the first two steps is having a title and a cover that will capture attention. And then hopefully simultaneously, the next step is hopefully having content that backs up whatever that title might be, because I'm a huge believer in creating intrigue with whatever I'm talking about, but also understanding, like you said, there's going to be reviews, there's going to be feedback, and we live in a world where you're kind of only as good as your reputation. You could pull the wool over everyone's eyes only so long, and it's not the smartest thing to do. The smarter thing to do would be to just kind of like live up to whatever promises you're making, because word's going to get out either way. So for me, it was like, my name being attached to it is going to take whatever life of its own, but I was very intent on trying to make as bold a title as possible and as promising a title as possible, while still being able to have people read it and be like, you know what? That was a bold promise. He seemed like he was talking a big game, but he actually lived up to it. So every time, a 5-star review comes in on either Amazon or Audible, I get still really, really excited because it's another affirmation to me that even to this day new people are discovering the work and they're getting what I had hoped for them to get out of it. So it's all about keeping myself excited and into it, and whatever form that takes, I'm game for it.
Heck yeah, man. That's right indeed. That's right indeed. Cause yeah, man, you're like probably out of like the hundreds of authors I've had on the show, you're probably in an elite category of like 3,500 plus reviews, man. You got like 3,678 reviews at the top of this recording, man. Congrats, bro.
Thank you. I appreciate, it's funny because I wrote the last Law of Attraction book you'll ever need to read, and it did take off, fortunately, and sold over 100,000 copies. And the next book I wrote after that was a book called 3 Words I Used to Sell 100,000 Books. And in my research for that, I discovered that like most independent authors, they'll sell anywhere from 2 to 3 to maybe 500 copies. And then even most authors on like with a major publisher, they might get 2 to 3 to 5,000 copies sold of their book lifetime. So when I was like looking into that and learning it, it really did, it was very humbling and it blew me away, and it kind of forced me to almost reverse engineer, like, Andrew, what are all the things that you did, what are all the steps that you took to get here, because some of it you could plan out and some of it you can't. Some of it you can control and some of it's completely outside of your grasp. So for me, it was a thing like, how much can I take and how much can I learn and how much can I put down on paper, so to speak, to really document and really explain maybe a model that other people can at least take a cue from, and obviously, not mimic. Everyone has their own way, but hopefully, put their spin on some of the things that I taught through that other book and use it for their own advantage when they're trying to sell more books and put it in the hands of more readers for them.
That's what I'm talking about, indeed. And framework is right. And my goodness, like, dude, like that book, three words that's used to sell 100,000 books. Like, I was like taking a road trip this past year, and like, I usually listen to straight through on an audiobook, but like yours, man, like, there were like so many strategies and tips. I'm like, dude, I have to break this up and I have to get to my destination. So, like, dude, I have to like list this when I get back home because it's so many tips, man. So, how is it like putting all that great content into that book and coming up with those three words? Because I'm sure it was a process to get to that point, man.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for the compliment. And as much as possible, what I do is intentional. And one thing that I was doing is, hopefully it wasn't, overwhelming all the tips. I tried to put it in a form where it was a breeze to get through. But, obviously a lot of authors and entrepreneurs, they have a model of like, I'll use my book as kind of like this entryway into my world, and then I'll sell other products, I'll sell programs, I'll do coaching and consulting or whatever it might be. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with that, but for me, if I'm ever going to do stuff on the back end, my goal is to completely exhaust whatever content and usefulness possible in the book itself, and then maybe challenge myself for something after. So I'm really pleased that you found a lot of good tips, because the intent was like, really like, empty the gun, empty the chamber, and put every single thing that I did and every way I knew of doing it and every way of explaining it out there in hopefully a consumable way. So whether people listen to the audiobook or they bought paperback, or they bought on Kindle, they could literally like sit through that and go through the 230 pages that it was and apply it for whatever they've got going, and mostly for a nonfiction author, of course. Also, I just wanted to be user friendly and easy to implement.
Oh, that's right, indeed, and that's what it is too. And that's the good thing is like the chapters are short too. That's the good news about it. It's like, man, it's like pick one and freaking go. That's right, indeed. And funny enough, the three words they actually weren't what I was expecting, and I love that you went that route. I won't spoil it in case you want folks to snag the book first before they
Thank you.
figure out what the three words are.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to hear that it surprised you, because like it's all about, again, every author has their own way. So I always explain like what I'm telling people isn't the way, it's just a way. And an a way that works for me is to pleasantly subvert expectations, but also you mentioned how like the chapters were reasonably short. For me, writing a book and presenting in a certain way, it's all about understanding that it's about the journey and experience of the reader, and you want it to have a certain flow. It's nonfiction, but that doesn't mean that it can't be interesting. And it has a lot of it's teaching rather than entertaining. But again, that doesn't mean that it can't have a flow and a rhythm to it, kind of like a song, or kind of like, any kind of like a roller coaster, kind of like anything, because it's all about saying, okay, as this one chapter is ending, what could I say or how could I present the topic coming up that's going to get people excited to jump to the next chapter, rather than closing the book and rather than putting it down and rather than doing something else. So there's a real method to my madness, and all my books really about it flowing from one chapter into the next, knowing selfishly that if they get through the book, hopefully then they get more content, which helps them, which means they use it, which means they get their result, which means they recommend it to other readers. So it's kind of like being selfishly selfless in that I want to help people and serve them, but also I know that when I can do that successfully, it'll just get more books out there for people.
Woohoo! That's what I'm talking about, indeed. So indeed, it's definitely to get more goodness out there to help out more people, indeed. The magic of books, the magic of reading. You love to say it, you love to say it. So, my goodness, man. So, any setbacks along the way with publishing the wonderful three words book that you had to overcome? As maybe some encouragement to those looking to finally finish their book? Because, my goodness, I'm pretty sure, like with any goal, there's going to be some random setbacks along the way.
Yeah, well, the setback wasn't with the setbacks. What they weren't with that specific book. I mean, setbacks that I experience are often the things that people don't expect. Like for me, every book is written a little bit differently because when I wrote the last Law of Attraction book you'll ever need to read, I was still in the mode of I'd been doing like a lot of typing on a regular basis. So I typed it the way anyone would type it. But when I wrote my most recent book, Just Feel Good, it'd been so long since I was typing a lot all at once that I couldn't type fast enough to keep up with the thoughts in my head. So recognizing that challenge and recognizing the frustration of not being able to put down on paper what's in my mind and feeling like I'm missing out on the expression of the details that and the information that I want to present, I just changed the way I wrote. And what I did for Just Feel Good that I kind of learned along the way while I was doing the three words book was I pulled out my phone and I opened up the notes app and I dictated it like text to speech or voice to text or whatever it might be, because fortunately I can speak as fast as I can think, even if I couldn't type. So there was no thought that got left out. And I spoke it, I dictated it, my iPhone captured it, and then I would end up like emailing that to myself and copying and pasting onto a Word document and editing it from there. So for me, whenever there is a challenge in terms of putting the ideas down the way I need them, I'm just always trying to think of ways to work differently and more efficiently to compensate for that. But also by that same token, a real challenge and frustration for my latest book, Just Feel Good, which I didn't encounter with three words. I used to sell 100,000 books, and I didn't encounter with the last Law of Attraction book you'll ever need to read, was coming up with a cover design that I was really happy with. And again, I'm not sure, people listening, the authors listening, I'm not sure how many of them design their own covers or choosing to or hire out, but I'm a bit of a control freak, which in and of itself is a challenge. So I design all of my own covers, and it was whereas the other books, it was so easy for me, and it was so seamless to get the ideas down. The cover for Just Feel Good, I literally had to do hundreds, and we're talking high hundreds of minor revisions, tweaking, and okay, well here's the now I have to make an audiobook version of the new tweak, and now I have to make a paperback version. I had to do the back cover, like all these things, and I had to flip back and forth between it's a long story why, but between Windows and Mac operating systems. So there was a lot of frustrating things where every time I wanted to do something smaller or go in a new step, it was like, I had to go like a roundabout way to get there, which is another way of like, my way of telling authors expect the thing that you're not expecting to be an issue to pop up there, and take it with as much patience and humor as possible, because the challenge is going to be the challenge anyway, and as you learn to get through it, all that's doing is building you up so that when you write another book after that, you've integrated and you've incorporated this new level of experience through those challenges, and then it makes just the next book and the next launch that much more efficient, because I think most authors realize writing the book is not even half the battle. Then it's the publishing, and most certainly and more importantly the marketing, so that you can get that book that you worked so hard on into the hands of readers that actually want to read it.
Woohoo! My man's preaching indeed, that good word indeed. You're just so right, my man, especially when it comes to everything on the wonderful book cover, like, of course, the audible version you have to come up with and dealing with those requirements. And then, of course, the back cover of the book. It's like there's so many things that folks tend to forget. It's like, oh, yeah, write a book. Yeah, let me write this thing. Woohoo, I'm done. But there's like so many other moving parts. So, any other parts that authors need to consider when it comes to publishing their work that they probably aren't even thinking of?
Well, it's more of a thing that we all notice already, but I think most of us still have to be told and to understand that I don't know if perfection is the enemy of good, but it's certainly the enemy of great. And for me, again, it's a way, not the way. I would though advise people to understand whether it's fiction and you're entertaining or nonfiction and you're informing. Really, when you just when you focus on the reader's experience, you don't focus on sounding smart or looking smart or being a celebrity or being a big deal or being even a success, but when you're focusing on the success rather of the reader and the experience of the reader and whatever you're promising them, you're focusing on a way of them receiving it in an enjoyable and easy way. A lot of things take care of themselves for you in ways and manners that you can't anticipate, including, even if you are struggling to tweak the cover, coming up with a concept of a cover, including coming up with a title that you might not have been expecting that's just perfect and really puts the pieces together, or a subtitle, or or even being inspired to add a chapter to the book that you'd never been thinking of before, that when it finally gets in the hands of readers, it just they respond to it and they love it. Or being inspired to start a YouTube channel afterwards or whatever it might be. So really that's my word salad and long-winded way of saying that the easiest ninja hack move that you have, or the most efficient or most powerful one that you have towards being success and successfully publishing and then successfully, and of course, successfully writing and then marketing that book, is really focusing on the success and happiness and satisfaction of the reader in whatever manner that you are presenting that book to them.
Woo. That's what I'm talking about indeed. That's right indeed. That's right indeed. That hashtag servant leadership swag, baby. That's right indeed. That's right indeed. Because, hey, at the end of the day, it's like it's great selling the books, even if some don't read them. But hey, you want to make sure when they read it, they're going to enjoy it. They're going to love it. And they're going to get something out of it indeed. Definitely indeed. So my goodness, my man, so since you've been on kind of a boatload of interviews promoting all the good work that you're doing, is there a question you wish folks would ask you more often when you're on the guest side of the microphone?
Mm. Well, the interesting thing is, I have at least three versions of interviews that I do. So, for example, if I was if this was about people that were for an audience that was interested in the law of attraction, I'd probably hope that they would ask me, like, what's the easiest way to instill gratitude into your day and into your daily routine? If it's for just feel good, along those lines, I'd probably say, hey, ask me, like, what's the easiest or most efficient or seamless way of just feeling good. Or if you're focusing on the topic of, like, selling more books, you kind of covered it. But I'd always say, you can ask me, like, what is your favorite or most powerful way of really getting those books out into the hands of readers? Which, that one, fortunately, I just answered, I hope so. So for me, it always comes down to, like, what is the thing I'm talking about, and whatever topic that is, what's the most powerful or useful way that the audience can take something from my answer and use it for their own use and benefit.
Sweet. That's what I'm talking about indeed. That's what I'm talking about indeed. So my goodness, especially with the Just Feel Good book now that you have, you got these three trifecta, you got the triangle swag going on. Is there another book you got cooking in that wonderful mind of yours, my man?
So there's a couple of books. I mean, I don't it's funny because Just Feel Good, before I ever even began writing it, I remember last year I was on an interview and people asked, like, hey, do you have any books on the way? And I'm like, yeah, I got something cool in mind. And I didn't tell them the title because I the title is, like, it's funny, it's like this big dramatic reveal. So I do have something cool that I'm considering, but I don't know if that's, like, the next project, because the next thing might be taking YouTube to the next level, or the next thing might be, more of a digital product. So I do have a couple of ideas for at least two other books, but writing for me is a very exhaustive process. I wrote, the Law of Attraction book in 2019, and I wrote three words last year. And then for some reason, I had the energy to write Just Feel Good this year. I never really know when I'm going to write another book, but I always wait until I'm inspired, because I never want it to be something where I'm dragging myself over the finish line. Because in my experience, when you're dragging your way through something that's creative like that, especially when you don't have to, it's going to come across in in a lower quality and a lower level of enjoyment and satisfaction for whoever actually ends up consuming that information. So, long-winded way, or long story short, or too long didn't read. I've got things that I'm thinking of, but I don't know if they'll come next year or next decade.
Hey, it's all good. It's all good. It definitely gets you, man, especially with the titles too, because it's like, yeah, you're right. Definitely want to kind of sometimes save things as a big reveal for one and two. You may get to writing the book, and then when you get close to the finish, you're like the title you had in your mind to start with ain't the same title you had in mind when it's finished.
Yeah. And if I may, Dom, I'm not even being like coy when I gave that answer that way. I was actually very intentional. The reason I gave that answer, and hope it's a useful one, is because assuming people don't have their backs against the wall with their finances, I encourage people like go in this direction of leaning into waiting when you're inspired, because that's the secret sauce or the special sauce to really getting the most, the most leverage and the most distance out of whatever work you're doing, whether it's fiction or nonfiction or anything else. So, me saying like I'm not ready to reveal it and I'm going to wait, that's me really hopefully trying to be a useful example to anyone out there that's on their own path of writing different books.
Yeah, man, you're definitely right too, because my goodness, like the whole gap year of, or I should say the gap years of between 2019 and 2022, like I'm not sure what the timetable was in your mind at first when you released the 3 words book after the last Law of Attraction book you'll ever need. But hey, you probably had like a game plan in your mind of how long you wanted to wait in between books. And like even myself, like there's still like just struggles with certain books, like trying to get out, like the certain book where I was trying to combine the whole podcasting and book thing where it's like, oh yeah, we're gonna do this massive project. And it's like it
Mm.
might just be an all ebook only since this is a ever evolving topic. Like things could change and then out of nowhere it's like, oh, maybe I'll get it done this year, and then this year turns into next year, and then you're like, oh wow, I guess I'm on 800 podcast episodes now.
Well, it's funny hearing you say that. Like for me, when I released 3 words I used to sell 100,000 books, it really surprised people. And it wasn't something that I had planned for a while. Like the way it broke down, well, first of all, last Law of Attraction book you'll ever need to read. It's about 208 pages. I wrote it in 9.5 weeks. 3 words I used to sell 100,000 books. That was the reason I wrote that was because the Law of Attraction book was taking off. And, I would post progress. I've sold 40,000 copies. I've sold 50,000, 75,000, on and on. And a lot of people were reaching out to me trying to get on like calls, like, let me buy you a virtual coffee and pick your brain. And I didn't want to charge friends. But I also didn't have like the time to talk to 500 people. You know what I mean? So I deviated from what some might say, would be this entrepreneurial wise decision of just writing something along the lines of law of attraction or mindset. And I went to a completely different world of marketing because I said, let me just answer all these questions and put down everything I did and have this useful piece so that from now on, whenever someone reached out to me about it, I'm like, it's $4 on Kindle, have at it. And then you notice I kind of returned back to the same vibe with Just Feel Good. That's obviously its own animal, but certainly a lot closer to the vibe and the direction of Law of Attraction versus this marketing book that kind of sticks out like a sore thumb. So I say that because like I'm open to the fact and embracing the idea that there's a level of unpredictability. And even though I do kind of have my next book in mind, I don't know if something else is going to come into my awareness or get in front of me that'll make me say, hey, you know what? Let me do this instead and let me deviate from what other people think is a wise game plan instead and just kind of like roll with it and see where it goes.
Woohoo! That's right indeed. Rolling like an egg, y'all. That's right indeed. That's right indeed. Just roll with it. That's right indeed. That's right indeed. Hey, it's definitely some inspirational goodness right there indeed, because like especially with Just Feel Good, if I'm not mistaken, it's basically, I guess in a way, like part two Reader's Digest of last Law of Attraction book that's geared towards folks who may get a little scared to see Law of Attraction on a book.
Yeah. So, and again, going along those same lines of like, I write when life and circumstances bring something in front of me. So what happened with the last Law of Attraction book you'll ever need to read is, again, I'm very grateful that I got such good feedback, and I asked it a lot of people where they would recommend it to friends and family and this and that. But I remember, I think it was last year, a friend of mine texted a video, and she met a random stranger at a sales conference, and that random stranger had my Law of Attraction book like on her device, and she was so excited and like, hey, say hi to Andrew, he's my friend, blah blah blah. And the way she answered the question was she was so excited by the book, but she was also kind of like embarrassed because like Law of Attraction is a very stigmatizing topic where, some people, they're worried that others will think it's too woo woo or whatever it might be. And it kind of it raised this flag to me of like, as many people recommend the book to others, there's probably others that even if they love the book, they feel weird or self-conscious telling their friend. So what Just Feel Good is about is, can I explain the law of attraction without ever using the terms law of attraction or manifestation? So except for the fact that I tell people in the book that I wrote a book called The Last Law of Attraction, book you'll need to read, I never use the words law of attraction in the explanation. So it's a much more giftable book where it doesn't matter if you're worried about being woo or not because it's so practical. It's a great stocking stuffer. I intentionally made it less than 100 pages because I want it to be a graduation gift or a birthday gift or a holiday gift, something that, even if people don't normally read books, you can give it to them because it's so compact, so you don't feel like, it's a chore for them or an obligation for them to read through. So I was very intentional, like, what can I do about presenting this content in a way that people would be much less, stigmatized and resistant around recommending to others and bringing that content into their world.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about, indeed. That's right, indeed. Well, I should say, and speaking of bringing this content to the world, especially making it a versatile gift. If your wonderful book just feel good, if it were a food, what would it be and why?
Well, Just Feel Good were food. It's like, honestly, I call it a really sweet snack because it's not like a full, like it's not like some huge meal that you have trouble digesting. And sweet in that it's easy, it's breezy, it's seamless, it's smooth, there's flow to it. So it's really like a fun, enjoyable snack that you can go to whenever you want without worrying about putting on any extra calories or anything like that.
Ah, okay. There you go. That's right, indeed. Letting it remain in the mind of the reader or listener. Be like, yeah, whatever snack it is, it tastes good and sweet and quick. It's yours, y'all.
Yeah,
That's
man.
right, indeed. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. So, my goodness. So, fun question for you since you're also a fellow entrepreneur, indeed. So, my goodness. So, with the good old entrepreneurial journeys, is going to be some magical, I guess, learning lessons along the way that actually set you up for success in the future. So, what would you consider your biggest learning lesson that actually lets you lean in towards more success?
Well, from an entrepreneurial standpoint, it sounds so cliche. The most useful thing that I've done hasn't been failing, it's been learning wherever I could from those failures. And the main one would be learning and understanding how to communicate your ideas in a way that your target market and your target niche, whoever it might be, where you really connect with them and you really reach them. And that goes down to titling a book or titling a product or writing the book description or the listing description for Amazon. So for me, the most useful things and the most useful lessons I've had are first in failing to convey value or the prospect of value to the person I want to reach, and finding ways of turning that around and articulating it better and learning about copywriting. Like for me, Dom, once I got introduced to the world of copywriting and selling through words and understanding that it's an art and a science all in one, and learning about people like John Carlton and Joe Sugarman and reading their books and going down that road and going down that rabbit hole, that's where a lot shifted for me, just in how I carried myself within the context of whatever it was I was offering to people. And I'd recommend anyone that hears like that they want to sell their books or they want to sell their products, if for some reason like the term copywriting doesn't kind of ring a bell to you, and I'm not talking about like trademarks and copyrights, I'm talking about like copywriting as in like WRITING, look it up, learn about it, and implement it into your entire sales process, your entire presentation process. And it will really change who you are as an entrepreneur and how you operate and how you reach levels of success in a much more efficient way.
Woo! That's what I'm talking about, indeed. Solid lesson too, because that's a certain type of skill, powerful one too. Just being able to apply copywriting to just about everything you're doing too. Just like getting folks to really pause and take a break from, especially in the wonderful world of scrolling where you can scroll through just about anything if there's a screen in front of it. And it's like, oh, wait, I got to stop here for a second. Let me read this, see what this is all about. Like, all right, there we go. Let me just go
Yeah.
ahead and click this buy button or better yet, add to cart and then add it to cart again and again.
Yeah.
And then wake up with the wonderful propeller hat in your head because you're feeling like a kid again from all the excitement.
Yeah. And you know, speaking of being a kid again, to date myself a little bit, I remember when we used to call it the information age, and we were really the information economy. And today we're in the attention economy. It's all about like if you can get someone's attention, and that doesn't mean that you have to do something crazy or zany. It doesn't mean that you have to be controversial. I mean, you can if you want, but it's not a requirement. It just means that you have to have a way of capturing their attention and capturing the right kind of person's attention that's going to want what you were offering, want to read what you were writing, want to buy what you were selling, want to consume what you were offering. And when you view it as the attention economy, it again, it's another thing that shifts your paradigm and changes the game and changes the way you approach things, so that you realize again it's not just about writing the book, even though that's such a vital piece obviously, but it's also about, okay, the writing's done, now what do I do about getting it, this book or getting this work into the hands of the right people that it's going to be served the most, and hopefully we'll be so excited that they'll then recommend it to other people and keep the cycle going and really reach even more people.
Woohoo! That's right, indeed. Reaching more people, indeed. Because no man's got to know. I know he's got a big goal of getting 1 million books sold and 1 million YouTube subscribers, indeed. That's right, indeed. It's going to happen. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. You might have enough for a whole hockey stick kingdom. That's right, indeed.
Hey man, I won't like any subscribers coming, I'm grateful. Any sales that come in, I'm grateful. And you know, I try not to judge and be hard on myself, but I do try to also check the figures every single day, just as a reminder of like, hey, cool, X number of people bought a book from me today. That's X number of people that invested their money and are investing their time and energy and attention. And I get excited about the prospect of hopefully delivering on that promise and hopefully making it more than worth whatever they spent to them in order to get through whichever book they choose from me.
Woohoo! Gotta love that mindset, indeed. Gotta love that mindset, indeed. So, my goodness, we're coming down to the magical question that every guest gets to receive. And that is if you wake up tomorrow and you were 25 again, but you're still in the current year, what advice would you give to yourself?
Ooh, wow. So, Dom, it's completely outside of the entrepreneurial world. If I was 25 in the current year, I would double down and reinvest in my health and fitness, because while things aren't impossible now, I had a lot more leverage and a lot more power behind doing any simple workout and any single piece. So I would take advantage of my age in that way, because I know that when I'm healthy and I have more energy, I'm going to work more powerfully and more efficiently on all the stuff that I want to do anyway.
Oh, there you go. That's right, indeed. Take care of that body, and the body will take care of you, indeed. That's right, indeed. That's right, indeed. If you want that power, gotta take care of the temple. That's right, indeed. Gotta make sure your stained glass windows still got stained glass in them.
Hell yeah. And you know, even today, where however old you are or however young you are, you know, whether you're lifting or you're doing yoga, whether you're doing your 10,000 steps a day, whether it's all about nutrition, whatever it might be. I mean, I highly recommend people like, you know, do whatever you can do to nourish your body and take care of yourself, because that longevity ultimately is what serves you and what helps you really get a lot of momentum with whatever it is that you're putting out as an entrepreneur or as an author or even just as a human being.
So I'm talking about indeed. I'm talking about indeed. I mean, barely scratched the surface of what my man knows. So for those who need to tap into the other 99%, because they probably got 1% of what my man has to offer. Indeed, what's the best way folks to do so they can keep up with your journey, my man?
Well, thank you for asking. I mean, my books are available regionally wherever you are in the world on Amazon or Audible. The audiobooks also on Apple Books. If you're in the US or you just want to make sure you have a refresher of the book titles, you can just go to awesomemarvelous.com. That's awesomemarvelous.com, and that'll put you to easy links to any of the books that you might want to check out, which also includes my YouTube channel. So if you don't want to pull your wallet out, hopefully I still might have something of benefit for you that'll serve you in some way, shape, or form. And again, Dom, thank you so much just for having me and asking such good questions and engaging this conversation with me, man. I really appreciate it.
Oh, well, I appreciate you too, my man, 'cause you're doing some great stuff indeed. And love the website name, by the way, man. What led to that thought process? Because most folks wouldn't even think about combining those two words together for a website.
So here's the funny thing. And by the way, thank you for a very unique question that I can't remember the last time someone might have asked. Just as you've been on this podcast for 6 years, I've been on this like venture of this new company for the past 5 years. And when I started my new company, I called it Awesome Marvelous Inc. because I technically wasn't even sure about which product or which direction I wanted to go in the beginning. I didn't write my book until like over a year later. But I knew that whatever I did, whether it's a physical product or it's an information product or whatever it might be, I knew that I'd be going for top quality and the energy and the intention of just something good. Some like awesome, marvelous. It's kind of like laying it on a little bit thick, but it's a wonderful kind of like guidepost and northern star for me of like, okay, make sure everything I do is awesome. Make sure everything I do is marvelous, and that kind of like always is there in the background in any project that I take on. So that was the inspiration for that website and for that company name.
Oh, love it indeed. It is indeed marvelous indeed. Especially when you take out the first letter of both words. It's like, oh, it's AM. So that's right, folks. Head over to that wonderful site that is AM in the PM at the time of this recording. But hey, it's also the AM in the AM as well. So morning, noon, and night, my man's got you covered for some awesome and marvelous content indeed. That's right. Indeed, that's right, indeed. So check it out, folks. Gonna put all the links to that in the show notes. That way you can keep up with this journey so it can feel good and beyond, plus ultra, as some would say indeed. So any parting words before I close up shop, Andrew?
Really more of thank you to you and to your audience for listening, and I'll leave with a parting words that really wasn't the topic of this show, but has so much more power than I could ever really convey. You just have to experience it to understand. But I recommend if people just take 5 minutes out of their life every single day to just feel good or to experience gratitude or just to make, think of things in their life that they appreciate, it'll go a lot further than you ever could imagine in some obvious but also not so obvious ways, some dramatic and some subtle ways. So, you know, that parting advice alone, it's really worth its weight in gold and then some. Take a few minutes out each day, just feel good, experience gratitude, enjoy it, regardless of what results might come. And I guarantee you will reach out to me at some point. You'll thank me later.
If you're hearing this part of the episode, that means you're one cool individual. Thanks a bunch for tuning in, and if you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to share it with at least one other person in your network. Bonus points for 3. And be sure to check out the backlog too while you're at it, because there are hundreds of wonderful episodes to choose from as well.